Phoena's Quest, Book 1, First Spark, by Chrissy Garwood. Chapter 8, An Uneasy Alliance. The dragon was asleep. Phoena waited in the darkness, listening to his heartbeat. Puffs of spark-laden smoke wafted upward from the head that rested on her shoulder. She had run out of declarations and petitions, and could find no way out of her predicament. She was almost asleep when the dragon snorted and lifted its head. The red eyes turned towards the further tunnel. Phoena listened. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. A glimmer of light revealed another presence. The dragon raised the coiled tail about her head, but Phoena pushed it lower until she could see. Two shadowy figures stepped into the cavern. A glowing circle of magical light, the size of a small melon, floated at waist height in front of two men. "How much longer are we going to wander in this maze of tunnels?" a familiar voice complained. "I thought you said you could find Aramis." What was Viscount Barapa doing here? The dragon roared and sent a blast of flame in their direction. "And I have," Lord Carillon replied. He waved his hand, and the glowing orb that hovered before him grew larger. The two men stared at the dragon, who narrowed his eyes. Barapa stepped forward without fear. "There's no need to show off, Aramis." The dragon roared again. The two newcomers seemed undeterred. "Where's the girl?" Barapa demanded. "Don't tell me you've lost her." "Of course he hasn't lost me." Phoena struggled to raise herself above the protective coils. "But I've failed to convince him that I won't run away. He thinks I might transport myself out again without taking him with me." Barapa and Carillon looked at each other. Phoena moaned. "Don't tell me you're also worried about that." They shuffled their feet, and the dragon puffed smoke at her. Phoena patted his fur and nodded. "Lord Aramis wants to know how you arrived here." "You understand him?" Barapa asked. "At the same time," Carillon muttered, "if you don't know how to lead us out of here, we're in big trouble." The dragon roared as if he was laughing. "Matron said trouble follows me everywhere," Phoena said. "I know how Lord Aramis followed me. He saw the floor open beneath me, and he leapt at me as I fell. But I didn't sense your presence." "We came a roundabout way," Carillon said. "I was watching for Aramis's shape-shifting magic. The portal closed so fast I almost missed my opportunity to activate a magical tracer." "And I was stupid enough," Barapa added, "to grab onto his cape as he leaned forward. He inadvertently dragged me along with him when he disappeared." "When we were in the hallway, you said there was no way out," Phoena said. "So how do you explain what has happened to us?" "I don't think we're out," Carillon replied. "You've brought us further in." "But I don't have any magic." Phoena pushed aside the bigger question. The two noblemen laughed, and the dragon smoked her again. "If you believe that Carillon began. Barapa interrupted him. "We discussed the evidence while we were coming here. First, there's your ability to make yourself forgettable. I pride myself on my memory for faces and names. But I was certain I'd never seen you before I found you in Carillon's room," Barapa said. "When I questioned the other servants, they told me you had been here for years." "You're not supposed to notice the servants," Phoena said. "Notice you!" exclaimed Barapa. "I find it hard to even focus on your face. Why do you think I grabbed hold of your arm in Carillon's room? I thought you were going to disappear." "When I squint sideways at you," Barapa continued, "I'm almost convinced I can see what you truly look like." "Active wards surround you," Carillon said. Most ordinary mortals can't see them, but they're there if you know how to look for them. I recognised the deep magic as soon as I entered my room. I've tried different spells and been unable to penetrate your defences. The more powerful the spell, the greater your ability to deflect it. You've wounded his pride, Barappa added. You broke his spells as if he was an amateur. Everyone knows he's one of the most powerful magic users at the Academy. Yet you made defeating him look easy. I didn't know there were any spells, Phoena mumbled. Then she remembered the flashes of light she had seen. That had only begun after Matron asked for permission to unveil Phoena's eyes. Had Matron done something to her? Phoena frowned as another thought arrived. What else was she unable to see? The dragon nudged her. Have you wondered, Carillion asked, why our shape-shifting Emberite friend seems so determined to keep you close to him? Convenient that he forgot to tell anyone he was a dragon. Barappa thinks Oramus was trying to find you when he broke into my room. The dragon hissed at them and flapped its wings. He rose into the air until her feet no longer touched the ground. Let me go, she cried. You've already told me you're too big to fly out of here. I refuse to believe you would leave your friends behind. Without warning, the dragon released the coils that bound her. Thankful that she had only a short distance to fall, Phoena tumbled across the ground. As she rolled, she wrapped her arms around her head to block out the terrible roar that filled the air. She crashed into the cavern wall. The dragon rose in wide circles to the roof of the cave. He continued to roar until the cavern filled with smoke. The noise ended abruptly. He had disappeared. Phoena staggered to her feet. They are not my friends, Lord Oramus said, stepping out of the smoke in his human form. He stopped directly in front of Phoena. He wasn't smiling. And I wasn't looking for you. I didn't know you existed. I thought I was dealing with an attack from a powerful magician. Something had been hammering at my defences since I arrived at the Academy. I'm used to shielding myself from other magic users, Lord Oramus said, but your power is something else. I tracked the source to Carillion's room, which surprised me. I'd been seated across from him at his table for 2 days and sensed no threat. Phoena glanced at the others. Carillion had his arms folded across his chest. Barappa leaned forward with great interest. She returned her attention to Oramus. I walked up and down the hallway just to be sure. Oramus glared at the smaller youth. I thought I was careful, but Barappa must have seen me. I thought they'd been led astray, but as I was unlocking Carillion's door, they appeared again. Viscount Barappa smiled. I had no choice, the Dragon Lord continued, but to shapeshift as soon as I entered the room. I was already in my dragon form when I saw you between me and the fireplace. You escaped through the fireplace, Barappa exclaimed. Oramus turned towards him, which allowed Phoena to step sideways. I only made it as far as the bucket she was carrying. You were in the bucket? I didn't know shapeshifters could vary their size. You were a humongous dragon here. Are you able to withstand her power in your larger form? If you want to hear my story, don't interrupt me. I apologise, Dark Barappa replied with a small bow. Please continue, my lord. You're very quick with your apologies. Oramus sneaked a glance towards Phoena. Everyone moved to keep her in their circle. Barappa, Your simple words have given you an advantage with our maiden, far more than either Carillion and I have managed, despite our magical scheming. Stop changing the subject, Carillion said. Finish what you were saying. It was fortunate for me that she has an affinity for fire. What do you mean? Carillion asked. There was a pause. The corners of Oramis's mouth twitched. If that ash bucket had contained water instead, I would have been soaked. I can assure you that soggy dragon fur smells worse than a wet dog. I'm sure there's something you're not telling us, Carillion muttered. I want to know how you discovered her fire affinity. But I can see that you don't intend to share that information. So I'll tell you what I've learned despite your deception. Oramus smirked, but Carillion ignored him. The pair were well matched in height and size, but the contrast between fair Oramus and dark-haired Carillion increased the drama. She couldn't recognise you in the dining hall because she didn't see your human form. She was captivated by the dragon brooch you were wearing. You boasted that you'd already won the challenge, but I can assure you it doesn't count if she kissed you while you were pretending to be a baby dragon. She's kissed him already, Barappa hissed. I have not. Oramus laughed at her denial. She's not going to kiss a little monster who tries to set her on fire and then bites her. I think she might have tolerated me as a pet, given time to know me better, but any advantage my dragon form could bring me has now been lost. He reached out and pushed Carillion. I find it ironic that you accuse me of scheming for an unfair advantage. We all know you tried using magic to coerce her. Lord Carillion's face flushed. I've already explained. I was testing the limitations of her power. Lord Carillion's hand slipped to where his sword should be if it hadn't been surrendered to the armoury master. The students were only permitted to carry their swords when they were away from school. He caught himself, but they all understood the gesture. You've changed the subject again. You said you bit her. Do you have a death wish? She's too dangerous. Dangerous, Phoena spluttered, but they were lost to their argument. It was a test, Lord Oramus said. She had burnt her hand, and I was wondering how a fire adept could come by such an injury. There is nothing like a little pain to... Phoena stomped her foot. A little pain? An unfamiliar emotion flooded her mind. Her hand acted without direction. With seconds to spare, she defeated the impulse to slap his face. Instead, she covered her mouth with the offending hand. She bowed her head. Her words echoed through the cavern. She felt sick. Despite years of abuse from her fellow servants, she had never openly protested. Torment must always be endured in silence. With her eyes closed, she edged further away. Before she could begin her silent prayer of repentance, rough hands grabbed her. "Don't let her get away!" Barappa shouted. Phoena opened her eyes and pushed at his hands, but the small nobleman wouldn't release her. Desperation made him strong. "If you leave me here, I have no magic to follow you." She recognised the terror in his eyes. I wasn't going anywhere." He shook his head. "You were fading." In desperation, he turned to his companions. Carillion nodded. There was a surge of magical energy. If Barappa hadn't moved, I would have lunged at you myself. "Apart from wanting to hit me," Oramus said, "what was happening in your head?" Phoena stared at Oramus. Carillion nodded in understanding. Another of your tests, Aramis? You took a great risk with our safety. I had every confidence that Barapa wouldn't allow her to escape. You can let her go now. Phoena felt the Viscount flinch. I won't, he replied. She considered the dismissive way the other noblemen were treating him. They weren't his friends. A different emotion awoke. She knew what it was like to be a pawn in someone else's game. She smiled at the smaller nobleman. Barapa seemed to understand and dropped one of his arms, but the other remained loosely around her waist. The remaining nobleman watched this silent negotiation. I told you he had an advantage over us, Aramis said. A pity he lacks the courage to steal a kiss. Those words evoked a different reaction in each of them. The arm around Phoena's waist tightened. I wish that bucket had contained water. She might have drowned you, Barapa said. Her heart leapt like a bird escaping a cage as someone grabbed her hand. Carillion's voice was beside her. Aramis, you fool! Everything went dark. She was falling again. Dear listening reader, I hope you have enjoyed this latest chapter from the first book in the Phoena's Quest trilogy. This is a beta copy, and the text may change between now and the official publication date. If you have any questions or suggestions that would make this chapter easier to read, please let me know. In return for your help, I will include your name in the acknowledgements as part of the reader team. Chrissy.